Attention bowlers, we are going to get started from Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. My name is Steve Kelly, and I will be your host and guide during this Class D North match today between Ed Sargent versus Chris Curley. And our match will commence immediately today. Good as always to have you along with us, originally live streamed on Sunday, April 21st. And available for rewatching anytime upon the conclusion of this match. If you're new to the ACST or Candlepin Bowling in general, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you and hope you enjoy this match and Candlepin Bowling as a whole. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. Your continued viewership is greatly appreciated. So that's Ed Sargent on lane 3 at Boutwells. He's dropped 7, and he's working on a 5-8-9 split, a triangle. And that's going to be a 7-box opener for Ed Sargent, the first of 5. The first box is of many here today. Ed Sargent, the away bowler, he has a seasonal record after 15 matches played of 58 and 152, with a home record of 26 and 86 after bowling 8 matches, and 32 and 66 after bowling 7 matches. That's a .30 and a .48 win-loss ratio, respectively. Season average for Ed Sargent is 92.1, as Ed Sargent working on a spare bid, left with a 5-10, the right side setback on lane 3 here at Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. Ed Sargent working on a 10-box. He will take that 10-box. That's a 10 in the second for Ed Sargent for 17 after 2 for Mr. Ed Sargent. Overall, Ed is 4th in D North Division 2 behind Paul Kravitz, Chris Curley, and Richard Lerman. Overall 13th in D-Class Division, Class D North, that is. Again, home and away averages very close to one another, 92.2 and 91.9 respectively. High single for Ed Sargent is 119. He bowled that versus Ray McAllister in round 15. And there is a spare for Ed Sargent on the 1 and the 3, just very gently taking him down. Ed Sargent being silently brilliant here. He achieved that spare so quickly, even Chris Curley almost didn't even see it, and I had to verify. I was like, was that the second or third ball? Sorry, I was getting caught in my own notes here. Ed Sargent filling a spare. He's a little off to the right of the head pin. That's a 1 fill. He took out just the 6 pin. So that's 28 after 3 for Ed Sargent. 1 mark already in this 5-game series here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Ed Sargent on the 1-3 pocket gently takes out a few more pins, left with the 2, 4, and 5 pins on lane 3 for a 10-box opportunity. 10-box possibility for Ed Sargent. Sargent, play action, 3rd ball. He's going to take an 8-box in the 4th. For 36 after 4 for Ed Sargent. We are off to the races here. Again, Ed Sargent's high single is 119. He bowled that against Ray McAllister in round 15. His high series, 502. He bowled that against Win Trafton in round 7. And for the season, Ed Sargent has 10 strikes, 76 spares, and 125 tens. He drops 6 here to conclude the first ball of the 5th box, which is the first half of the first game. The second ball is a little off target. He takes 1 more out. He's looking at a 7, 8, 9, or 10 box possibility. 1, 3, and 7 pins on the deck for Ed Sargent, bowling on the left on lane 3 at Boutwells. A busy Boutwells here on a Sunday late morning. That's a 7-box for Ed. That's going to be 40, what appears to be 44. Actually, I think I may have misscored. The 8 is a 9. I will just update my score to match CompuScore. There's an electronic scoreboard that is just slightly off screen here, and I'm just going to make sure we are in sync with that. Always good to remind that the on-stream scoreboard is always unofficial. The one that the bowlers are keeping track of, however it may be, is the official one that ends up being submitted. So just for the sake of the bowlers and a little bit for my own sanity, I just keep mine in sync with theirs. Chris Curley, we're saying hello for the first time today at Boutwells. He starts out in lane 3, and he opens up with what some call a lemon drop. He takes out the 6 pin and the 6 pin only. That's Chris Curley bowling on lane 3. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. I'm Steve Kelly. It's great to have you along. Thanks for watching. Both on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour page on Facebook, as well as Candlepin Bowling Network on Facebook, and later on YouTube, if all goes well. Chris Curley on a second ball, a remedial second ball, takes out everything but the 1 and the 3. Chris Curley is shooting for a 10-box, and he will take an 8-box to start out his first game. The opener is an 8 over Ed Sargent, 7 after 1. Here's the scores as a recap. actually. Might have a slight glitch with that. Okay, we'll come back to that. Anyways, Chris Curley 8 after 1. And that looks like a 4-drop. Wash out of the left side for Chris Curley for a spare. Spare shot, that is. Spare leave. Chris Curley with a right-handed left hooking ball. Does connect with the object pin, but the pins kind of dance around lightly, leaving the 6 and the 10 on the deck. 6-10 for Chris Curley for a 10 box. And it's going to be a 9 for Chris. 17 after 2 on pace with Ed Sargent. And real quickly, I'm going to see if I can just make an adjustment here on the... there we go. Sorry about that. I had one slight visual thing I had to adjust in OBS and just got confused in my own technical setup. Anyways, Chris Curley drops 2 off the left side. The 4 and the 7 pins are down. Most of the deck is left for a spare shot. Chris Curley, play action, punches out the right side. That's the right side half Worcester. The 3 and the 9 pins taken out in addition to the 4 and the 7 pins. He's looking at a 4 box or greater, Chris Curley, on lane 3. He's at 17 after 2. Could get to 27 after 3 if he can take everything else. So he nearly gets there with a 9. He's at 26 after 3 now. Now let's take a look at the fixed visual scoreboard here. We have Ed Sargent at 44 after 5, and we have Chris Curley at 26 after 3. And at this point, Ed Sargent had a mark with a 1 fill for 28 after 3. Chris Curley trailing by 2 at this point in the game. Curley fires on lane 3, and he's off to the left again. Takes out the 4 and the 7 once again in a deja vu shot from just 1 box earlier. The 1, the 2, the 3, the 5, the 8, the 9, the 6, and the 10 are on the deck. Chris Curley on lane 3 on the left in the black shirt. Chris Curley fires. Play action on the pocket, and he almost converts with a spare. That was a really good shot. I wouldn't have played it any differently. Piece of wood flies way out of play. He's left with the 8 pin to shoot at for a 10 box. Chris Curley. Curley releases off to the left for another 9 box. His third 9 box in a row. That's 35 after 4 for Chris Curley. Chris Curley for the season, he's bowled 17 out of 18 matches. This actually, I believe, is his final match. He's at 125 and 113 for the season. At home, he's 65 and 47 with 8 matches played. That's a 1.38 win-loss. And then when he's away, that's 60 and 66 after 9 matches with a .91 win-loss. Chris Curley winds up, he pitches, he drops 7. Didn't connect with the head pin, but had a generous leave. 1, 3, and 9 pins for a spare. And this could go if he just connects with the correct pocket. Doesn't sail off to the left. Chris Curley, but unfortunately he does sail off to the left. And I can kind of tell what he's doing. It's sort of that release he has. Sometimes sails and grips a little bit too much to the left than I think he would prefer to have. But anyways, so same shot for a 10 box, 1, 3, 9. He'll connect with the 1 and the 3. That was a much better shot. The 9 pin stands. That's another 9 box for Chris. Almost a perfect half of 9s. He's at 44 after 5. Here at the Atlantic Hamilton Singles Tour, we have a tie game here halfway through the first, 44 to 44. By all accounts, Ed Sargent and Chris Curley in a deadlock right now here at Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. I'm Steve Kelly, and we're going to say hi to Ed Sargent once again. Bowling for the first time on lane 4. That's Ed Sargent, also in the black shirt on the right. We have Dino Dellis on lane 5 against John Lescarbo. That's a different ACST match going on right now to the right of me. So we have a lot of bowling going on today. Ed Sargent dropping 9 almost immediately. That's a 5-pin, single-pin spare shot for Mr. Ed Sargent. Sargent fires, and just a little bit off to the left. Does connect with a 5. Kind of more lands where the 3-pin was. So Ed Sargent's shooting for a 10 box here on lane 4. And Sargent will just barely miss it. The 5-pin is spared twice. That's a 9 box for Ed Sargent for 53 after 6 now. Ed Sargent, what more can I tell you about Ed Sargent today? Again, he's 58, 152. He's had a bit of a struggle of a season. He's 13th in D North Division 2. And today it would be cool if he can get a bunch of points and just kind of get some stats padded out. I think statistically he is technically eliminated from the wild card playoff rounds, but you know what? doesn't mean we're not going to celebrate any successes or wins that Ed Sargent has today. So we're rooting for Ed Sargent just to have a great game and a great series of marks and spares and strikes and whatever comes with it. So that's Ed Sargent with the 3, the 5, and the 6 pins. He missed the spare shot, but he's going for a 10 box now. 7, 8, 9, or 10 for Ed Sargent on lane 4 at Boutwells. And that's going to be a 9. He leaves the 5 on the deck. So far, Ed Sargent's been bowling 7s, 9s, and 10s, so he's pinning out pretty well for the most part. And he's at 62 after 7 at this point in the game. Ed Sargent on lane 4, on the right lane here. Ed Sargent on lane 4, straight shot down the pocket, and he's left with a, well, it could have been worse. He's left with a left side setback. It was originally going to be a Matt Susi special, the 5, 7, 10, but the 10 dropped late, so he's left with the 5 and the 7. Ed Sargent, 62 after 7 for a spare bid, 5 and 7. He just picks 1. He picks the 5, leaving the 7 on the deck. 9 or 10 box for Ed Sargent now. Ed Sargent has 10 strikes, 76 spares, and 125 10s for the season. He has a 30% perfect box percentage. That's another 9 box for Ed Sargent. The 4th 9 of the game for 71 in 8. Ed Sargent has 6,907 seasonal total pins. Sargent fires near the head pin, just off to the right, connects with the 3, takes out a few more for the road. The 1, the 2, the 4, the 8, the 6, and the 10 pins are on the deck for Ed Sargent. Sargent, play action. Sails through the same void the first ball went through, so no additional pins on the second. 4 to 10 box ratio, 4 to 10 box range for Ed Sargent. And he fires. He's on the 1-2 pocket. Cleans up nicely. Deadwood's still rolling. It looks like it's going to be a 9 box, though. At Boutwells, the Deadwood seems to have a generous push against some pins that are up and down. And let me translate that into words that actually make sense. At Boutwells, the decks seem to be mostly juiced to the point where Deadwood will take out a lot of pins rather handily, as opposed to some other houses like Lakeside or Lita, where it's a little bit tougher. The pins feel more like they're glued to the ground. That kind of thing. Ed Sargent drops 6, the 1, the 3, the 6, and the what appears to be the 8 pin, if my eyes don't deceive me. Takes out 3 immediately, the 3 horsemen in the front, leaving the 8 pin on the deck for a 10 box or a 9 box. One of the two will happen. He's at 80 after 9. Ed Sargent releases for a 10 box, and the wood unfortunately redirects the ball out of harm's way of the 8 pin, and that's another 9 box. A perfect half of 9s for Ed Sargent. That's 89 game 1 total for Ed Sargent. And that will be it for game 1 for Ed Sargent. That is confirmed on the scoreboard. We are going to say hi once again to Chris Curley to bowl his first second half of this 5-game series here at Boutwells Bowling Center. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. I'm Steve Kelly, and we're about to say hi to Chris Curley on lane 4. His first time bowling on the right lane of the pair of lanes we were assigned today. Chris Curley with a season average of 97.7, 17th best in D class. His home average is 98.6. His away average is 96.9. That's Chris Curley with the left side lemon drop. That's a 4-pin and a 4-pin only. Chris Curley is now working on a spare ball now. Winding up, pitches, play action. A little too full directly on the head pin this time. He's left with the spread eagle minus the 4-pin now. That means the 2, the 3, the 6, the 7, and the 10 pins are up with nothing else. Chris Curley shooting for a 10 box. It's going to be an ugly attempt for a 10. He takes 1 out. That's a 6 box for Chris Curley. That's 6 after 6 for 50 in 6 for Mr. Curley. Home average 98.6. Away average 96.9 for Curley. Overall, he is second place in D North Division 2, ahead of Paul Kravitz, Ed Sargent, and he's trailing Richard Lerman all the while. In the wild card, he's currently in, but right at the bottom of the bracket, and that's a strike for Chris Curley, a rather definitive mark. The first strike of the game, that is, for Chris Curley. 60 in 7 plus a fill ball. And again, he is currently in the wild card bracket towards the bottom, so he needs to continue to do well to maintain that positioning. And overall, he's 8th place in D North. Chris Curley for the double. A little bit off the head pin. Doesn't quite connect with the head pin. He's left with the 4 horseman left side plus the 10, but he has one more ball to complete this fill. 1, 2, 4, 7, and 10 on the deck with a piece of wood between the 1 and the 2. Curley releases right on the correct object pocket, and he will complete the strike fill with a 10, and he'll continue the mark streak in the 8th with a spare for 80 plus a ball in the 8th. Chris Curley has suddenly come alive here in the second half. 80 and 8. Compare that to 71 and 8 for Ed Sargent. Chris Curley's average is 97.7 normally. Looks like he's on track for that at this point. That's a 5 fill on that spare. He's on the head pin, but pins just didn't quite cooperate today. And what do we call this? I don't really know what we call this. 7, 8, 3, 6, 10. It's ugly. That's what it is. This spare leave. Curley's going to try for it, though. He releases. Had the right idea. He wanted to go for the 3-6 pocket, but he was a little bit too much to the right and took out only the 6. 3, 7, 8, 10 for a 10 box for Chris Curley. He's at 85 and 8. He's going to get in the 90s with this. Takes 2 more for the road. There's an 8 box that will put him at 93 and 9 by my watch, and that is correct. That is in sync with the CompuScore scoreboard. So Chris Curley will take the first game already. He still has 1 box to go, so he's just playing for some additional pins for the total. The all-important total, which is worth 4 points at the very end for grand total pinfall. Curley fires on lane 4. On the head pin, pin still falling. Play action. 2-pin wiggling, 10-pin stands. And that's what Chris Curley has to shoot at for a spare bid here in the 10th. Fourth lane, 10th frame. He shoots at the 2-pin, which is the object pin, and he tries his best, but he's left with the 10-pin and the 10-pin only. So the best he can do is 103 or 102. And Curley will get that 102 with that 9 box as the ball sails into the channel. 102 to 89, Chris Curley victorious in the first game over Ed Sargent. Chris Curley over average. But Ed Sargent with a 92.1 average generally in the season, so not too far off the mark, and there's still plenty of bowling here to go. So we're going to move on to the second game without further delay. And Ed Sargent will be returning to the approaches here very shortly. Thank you for watching the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. I'm Steve Kelly, and it's Ed Sargent at Chris Curley today. And Chris Curley is focusing on playoff contention. There are several folks in the D class in particular that are trying to get into the bracket or maintain their bracket position. Chris Curley being near the bottom of the bracket, he really needs to maintain a good performance today in order to stay there or do better. I know he's in contention with Brian Hebert in particular for the bottom spot, so the results of these matches, including Brian Hebert's match later on today, will mean a lot. Ed Sargent, wow, with a 6-7-10. He had a ball that sailed to the right, and I thought it was going to go into the gutter, but it stayed on, and it took out the 10-pin. He's looking at the 6-10 for a 10 box. Ed Sargent will start off the second game with a 9 box after 1. That's Ed Sargent in the black shirt on lane 3. This is Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. Really nice, pretty bowling alley. 24 lanes, 12 on each side with all wood approaches, all wood lanes. Used to be owned by WNDS Stars and Strikes Dan Murphy. Dan Murphy was a fantastic bowling enthusiast before he passed away, and he was very active in the bowling community, hosted several shows on WNDS TV 50, and he owned this bowling center back in the day. I have only bowled here like twice in my lifetime, and it was like 15 years in between both, but still is a very nice and well-maintained house. The lanes have a really nice kind of texture and kind of shading to them. I don't really know how to describe it, but I really like kind of like the reflectivity of the lights and the pins and the general aesthetic of this particular alley. It looks really nice. Anyways, that's a 9 box for Ed Sargent. He's really good at 9 boxes today. That's 18 after 2. Sargent fires on lane 3. He's going to sail off to the left and take out only the 10-pin. That's 1 down in the first of 3 balls. But this is a spare shot for Ed Sargent. 18 after 2 once again. This is the spare bid. Ed Sargent takes 1 more out, the 4-pin on the left side. 2 down, 8 up. In the past 5 matches, Ed has been steadily improving. Starting in week 11, he's been rising from 459 to 485 series matches. So Ed Sargent is making a marked improvement. A lot of the the ACST, we talk about brackets and places and positionings and all that, but, it's also about self-improvement. That's a lot of Candlepin bowling on the whole. You can't be 100% perfect all the time. No one is always the best all the time. And it's just about kind of figuring, it's kind of like a journey through one's mind and cognitive ability and just kind of figuring out what do you do best, what do you do most consistently, how can you maintain that, how can you improve. Ed Sargent with a 7 drop, the 6-8-10, I believe, but he misses it, goes into the gutter, takes out nothing. 7, 8, 9, or 10 box possibility for Ed Sargent in the 4th box here. Sargent will take a 10 box. That was a nice 10. That was kind of a miss the second, get the third kind of situation. Technically, you might call it a 3-ball spare or Paul Grant special. That's 36 after 4 for Ed Sargent, with 1 to go before he sits. Ed Sargent's past 12 of 15 matches have totaled over 450 in terms of series for each one. Sargent fires on lane 3, taking out 5 pins. That's the right side hay bale. 3, 5, 6, 8, 10. Spare leave for Ed Sargent would be a nice one to sit on for the half, and he takes 2 more out. Not quite a spare, but not bad for pinning. Still get the 10 box and get a 46 half. He can take these 3 out. In the past 5 matches, Ed Sargent has taken 24 points, and that's +2 compared to his previous 5 matches with a 22-point take-home. That's going to be a 7 box for Ed Sargent, I believe, for 43 after 5 that he's going to sit on. A markless 43 after 5. But Ed Sargent today has been very consistent in terms of 9s and 10s. None of the boxes he's thrown today have been disastrous, so that's always good, which means it's easier to recover from. You can just get a few marks, get right back in it. Chris Curley, meanwhile, who got hot in the second half of the first game with a strike and a spare, he had a 102 to finish off the first game. Chris Curley, high single 143. He bowled that against Richard Lerman in week 1 in a home game. And his high series 536, he bowled that versus Veronica McAllister in week 15 in an away game at Academy Lanes. Chris Curley with a right side lemon drop on the 6 pin. The second ball takes out a few more, leaving the 3 and the 10 pins. No spare, but you can get a 10. You can get a 10 box here if you can take out this 3 and 10. This is 10 box practice today. Chris Curley will take a 9 box. He hits the object pin, but the deadwood kind of redirects things around and doesn't quite result in the pin action he was looking for, so that's a 9 box after all is said and done for Mr. Chris Curley. He has 26 strikes, 129 spares, and 143 10 boxes for the season. Chris Curley has a 35% perfect box percentage. He has 8,305 seasonal total pins. Chris Curley has plenty of superlatives to his name. He has the 6th best high single in the D class, tied with Win Trafton at 143. He scores on average 8.2 points per home match and 6.67 points per away match. In the past 5 matches, Chris Curley has taken 32 points. And it's a little bit down compared to his previous 5, which was 38 by comparison. That's a 7 box for Chris Curley in the second. For 16 after 2, confirmed. Just waiting on the compy score. The one the bowlers were keeping track of. Just make sure that was in sync. 7 out of Chris Curley's 17 matches have been over 500 for a series total. He averages 1.53 strikes per match, 7.59 average spares per match, and 8.42 average 10s per match. Across the past 10 matches, he's averaged 1.6 strikes per match. Across the past 10 matches, he's averaged 8 spares per match. Chris Curley working on a bit of a difficult leave here. It looks like it's the 2, the 4, the 6, and the 10 pins for a 10 box. Chopping out wood. We'll call that the wood choppa. That's 7 for Chris Curley for 23 after 3. Ed Sargent up by 3 at the same point in the game with a 26 after 3. Chris Curley, lane 3 at Boutwells Bowling Center. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Chris Curley with a nice pocket shot, and it was a really nice hammer ball, all things considered. The 4 and the 7 pins are on the deck. Should be a fairly simple spare opportunity for Chris Curley. I know what he was aiming for. Went a little bit too far to the left, just about an inch or 2 off of the pocket. Shooting for a 10 box. Same shots. 4-7. Chris Curley. Into the channel. That's an 8 box for Chris. 31 after 4. Ed Sargent up by 5 at 36 after 4 at the same point in the game. With 1 to go before Chris Curley sits. Most recently, Chris Curley faced Paul Kravitz at Boutwells in round 17. He took 10 points with a 507 series. With a 105, 93, 89, 112, and 108, he had 2 strikes, 10 spares, and 7 tens. Chris Curley washing out the right side back triangle. And a second ball in the spare bid. He tries to go for the center, but can't quite connect with the pocket. Only connects with the direct center, going full straight through. The 2, the 3, the 4, the 7, and the 8 pins for a 10 box are what Chris Curley shoots at, and he takes a few more out for a 7, leaving the 3, the 7, and the 8 for a 7 box. That's 38 after 5 for Chris Curley, sitting on 38. Ed Sargent at 43 after 5, and Ed Sargent is going to stand back up, and he's going to keep on plugging away here at Boutwells in Concord. So Ed Sargent, again, just take a look at some of his stats while we have a couple of free seconds. So, again, it's all about self-improvement. You know, Ed Sargent has been on the upswing in terms of stats. And I'm sure with enough practice and enough repetition and consistency, that will only get better for Ed Sargent as he drops a few on the first ball, the 6th box, the first ball here. And the 1, the 2, the 3, the 5, the 4, and the 7 are left on the deck, and he takes out everything but the 2 and the 3. For a 10 box, he's got the goalpost, the 2 and the 3 on lane 4 at Boutwells. Piece of wood rolling in front of all of that business. I believe it's still in play, but we'll see. It wouldn't do Ed any good anyway, but he doesn't quite connect with it no matter what. So that's an 8 box for Ed Sargent. That's 51 after 6. Take a look at the scores once more. At this point in the match, we have Ed Sargent up in the match by 13. He has bowled 1 additional box than Chris Curley, but overall, that's where we stand. Ed Sargent on the head pin. A nice crackly pocket shot, dropping 6, but there's no wood to help him. The 4, 6, 9, and 10 are on the deck. He fires for a spare, just has to pick a side and go with it. He takes out the 10 pin, leaving the 4, 6, 9 for a 7, 8, 9, or 10 box possibility for Ed Sargent. Sargent, play action. Takes out 1 more for an 8 box, leaving the goalposts, leaving the 4 and the 6 pin. That's 59 and 7 for Ed Sargent. What more can I tell you about Ed Sargent? He averages 3.25 points per home match, 4.57 points per away match. Currently, his overall average is at the highest it's been all season. It's been steadily improving at 92. Ed Sargent's most recent match versus Ray McAllister at Academy Lanes in round 15 resulted in 4 points for Mr. Sargent. He bowled a 485, which was his best away series this season. Ed Sargent with a 9 drop and just missing the spare on the 7 pin. He rolled his new high single for the season against Ray McAllister in round 15 at 119. He threw 3 strikes, 5 spares, and 7 tens. And that's a 10 box for Ed for 69 and 8. And in that match against Ray McAllister, Ed Sargent rolled the most strikes in a single match. Sargent on lane 4. First ball leaves the 4 horsemen right side plus the 9 pin. The 1, the 3, the 6, the 10, and the 9 pin on the deck for Ed Sargent. We're having a fantastic time here at Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire, watching Ed Sargent bowl against defending home bowler Chris Curley here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Both of these bowlers call Boutwells home, though, since we are at the end of the season where we're kind of all the divisions turn inward back towards their divisional opponents who all bowl out of the same house. So away and home is just kind of a formality at this point. That was a 10 box for Ed Sargent. 79 in 9 at this point in the match for Ed Sargent. And first ball of the final box is a left side washout. 1, 3, 5, 6, 9, 10. No wood to help him. 1-3 pocket would be helpful if he could take this out. But he's left with a 1-3-5 for a 7-8-9 or 10 box for a potential 89 game for Ed Sargent. Ed Sargent winds up, pitches, play action, and he takes 2 more out for the road, leaving only the head pin. That's a 9 box, and that should be an 88 after 2 for Ed Sargent for a 2-game total of 177 for Mr. Sargent. Ed Sargent has had 1 spare today. Compare that to Chris Curley's 1 strike and 1 spare. Chris Curley needs to get to 88 or better to take any points. 88 will tie and net each bowler 1 point. Surpassing 88 will net Chris Curley 2 points, and if he fails to do either, Ed Sargent will take 2 points for that 88. So Chris Curley now. Hope this broadcast finds you well. If you're just joining us, thank you for checking out this Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match. I'm Steve Kelly, and that's Chris Curley down there on lane 4 in the black shirt. He washes out 5 for a right side hay bale with a piece of wood over the 3-pin, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10. And he has the right idea for the spare bid, but things just don't quite fully cooperate. The 10-pin is the only pin remaining for Chris Curley, and he's shooting for a 10 box now, and that's just barely a miss on that 10 for a 47 after 6 for Chris Curley. If you live in the area or are willing to make the pilgrimage to New England, the Candlepin bowling community would absolutely appreciate your interest and visitation. Check out candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center if you would like to give this unique regional sport a try and meet some of your heroes or favorite bowlers in the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Chris Curley is dropping 6, 3, 6, 10, and 4. Takes out the 6 and the 10 for the 3 and the 4 pins left on the deck. No spare, but can get an 8, 9, or 10 box. Chris Curley for the 10 box, and he nearly does get it, but he will take a 9. Connected with the object pin that would have made that 10 box happen, but again, the pin just didn't cooperate. Sometimes that happens at Candlepin bowling, you know? Chris Curley at 56 after 7. Ed Sargent at 59 after 7. Chris Curley on the headbin, dropping 7. Very nice pocket shot. I really liked the kind of flow of that ball hitting the pocket, but here he's looking at the 2, the 4, and the 5 pins, the triangle. And Chris will beam the 5 pin out of existence, but will leave the 2 and the 4 pins on the deck. 8, 9, or 10 box possibility for Curley. Releases, pitches, play action, takes 1 more out for the road. That's a 9 box. And that will be 65 after 8 for Mr. Curley. 65 to 69 so far in this match. Ed Sargent up by 4. Chris Curley needs a mark or something to be able to surpass Ed Sargent at this point. Chris Curley off the headpin to the right this time, and it looks like it's going to be 1, 2, 5, 9, and 10 pins on the deck at this point. And he chops 1 more out in the second ball. He's looking at a 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, I believe. Actually, I can't tell if that's 3 or 4 pins on the deck. We'll confirm that in just a moment here. I believe that's a 6 box. We'll confirm. Waiting on the confirmation. It is a 6 box. Yes, I did hear 6, and I saw 6 plugged into copy scores. That's 71 after 9 for Chris Curley. Compare that to 79 and 9 for Ed Sargent. Curley on lane 4, he fires and takes out the right side back corner triangle. 3 down, 7 up, 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 7, 9. Curley for the spare and misses. Swing and a miss. This will be for a 10 box, and this is, at this point, going to be points for Ed Sargent. 5 box, a rough 5 box for Chris Curley. Ed Sargent will take the second game. We have a competitive match here, folks. Chris Curley is up in the total by just 1 at this point. 2-game total, 178 for Chris Curley with that 76. Ed Sargent with a 2-game total of 177. Ed Sargent will be taking points home today, at least 2 as a minimum. Both bowlers have taken 1 game apiece, 2 games of 5 down here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. And we'll just pause for 1 moment. There you go. I was just checking with the paper copy to make sure everything was in sync as usual, and, you know, just the whole thing with verifying scores and doing whatever we can to kind of make sure everything is just perfectly in sync. We are going to move on here, though, to the third game here. And we're going to see Ed Sargent, you know, take the lanes and approach his runs again. Haven't had a chance to show you the standings yet. Haven't had a free moment, but you'll see Ed Sargent is 4th in Division 2, while Chris Curley is the 2nd in Division 2 of the D North class. Ed Sargent dropping 6 to begin with, the 1, the 3, the 4, and the 7 pins for a spare lead with some wood that may be favorable. It all comes down to just some careful aim on Ed Sargent's part. Takes out 2, leaving the 1 and the 3 on the deck. You're watching Ed Sargent on lane 3 in the black shirt on the left. I'm Steve Kelly. It's a pleasure having you along for the ride here at the Atlantic Campus Singles Tour. It's an 8-box for Ed Sargent to start out this third game. Match is fairly close in terms of total, and both bowlers have taken 1 game apiece. So far, we're fairly evenly matched. This is a fairly important match for Chris Curley in particular to maintain his playoff standing. So Chris Curley may have to hit the gas just a little bit more to make sure he maintains the currently lower spot in the wildcard bracket that he currently has in D North. Ed Sargent for a spare bid, pin still falling, and that looks like the 2, 4, and 5 pins for a 10 box. He hit the right kind of object pin, but I think there just wasn't enough velocity to make that complete the round trip and take out all the pins for a spare, but Ed Sargent will clean that up for a 10 box for 18 after 2. And we'll take a look at the standings while we have a couple of seconds. So we have Chris Curley at 125, 113, Ed Sargent in 4th place at 58 and 152 again. We're very late in the season. This is actually Chris Curley's final regular season match. Ed Sargent still has a few more. Bowlers can bowl asynchronously, and they can schedule their own matches on their own terms. Some bowlers are quicker than others to get those out of the way. Chris Curley has been very eager to get his matches done this season. Ed Sargent still has a few extra to go for the season. So after 1 ball, Ed Sargent's just waiting for wood to settle. It is the 3, the 6, and the 7 pins down there on lane 3. Piece of wood's taking its time, and Ed Sargent very smartly waiting for that to stop. It's also kind of the rules where you have to wait for dead wood to reasonably settle. Poor Ed, he releases, and I think he knew what he did. He just released off to the right. Something about the control of the ball he just lost there. Does it twice in a row for a 7 box for Mr. Sargent. 25 after 3 for Ed. Chris Curley has yet to bowl here in the third game. Ed Sargent, up to this point, has bowled an 89 and an 88. And he's currently at 25 after 3 in the third game here. Chris Curley, meanwhile, has bowled 102 and 76. Ed Sargent on the head pin, on the pocket. Pin's still wobbling. The 6 and the 7 pins. The 7 pin in particular is wobbling. The 6 pin is buttressed by a decent amount of wood. Ed Sargent sails through the center and takes out a piece of wood that isn't nearby either pin. Just looking at an 8, 9, or 10 box possibility now, Ed Sargent. And he releases, but the ball misses. That's an 8 box. 33 after 4 for Ed Sargent. You're watching the ACST. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Ed Sargent down on lane 3, bowling against Chris Curley out on the lanes. Thanks for watching. We are at Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire today. That's at 152 North State Street in Concord. There are 24 lanes, 12 on each side. Boutwells uses manual scoring and manual lane resetting, with CompuScore being the scoring software used. Fun fact, that is the software that of which I use the visual aesthetics as inspiration for my on-stream scoreboard. Same fonts and everything. Ed Sargent with an ugly leave here. I don't even know what to call this, but it's the 1, the 4, and the 5. When all has been said and done, that's a 7 box for Ed Sargent. That's 40 after 5 for Ed Sargent for a 2.5 game total of 217 for Ed Sargent with that 40 half. Chris Curley with a 2 game total of 178 thus far will be stepping up to the approaches now to start out his third game. Chris Curley with a lot to prove with a big victory today if he can take home a lot of points. Still a little bit early. He's got at least 2 so far for the day. Chris Curley with 1 strike and 1 spare today, all of which was achieved in the first game. Curley releases, and the 7 drop right off the bat. The 1, the 2, and the 4 pins are on the deck for a spare bid for Chris Curley. Chris Curley working on a spare bid. He fires. It looks like it's on target, and it is. It's a spare for Chris Curley. Perfect so far in the third game with a spare in the first. 10 plus a ball after 1. Let's see what Chris Curley can do. Game on. Chris Curley releases. He's on the pocket. That's going to be a big fill. That's an 8 fill, leaving the 5 and the 8 pins on the deck with a piece of wood in front of it. Although it might be a deceptive piece of wood because it's not fully covering the 5 pin. Let's see how Chris can take it out. And like I said, that was precisely what I was worried about. Excuse me, that's an 8 fill, not a 9 fill. If I could type. Chris Curley for a 10 box. He will clean it up for a 10. Would have been a spare, but that piece of wood, he aimed in the right spot, but the piece of wood was the deflector in that situation. So Chris Curley sits at 28 after 2. Compare that to 18 after 2 for Ed Sargent at the same point in the game. Curley on the pocket once again. He seems to really have dialed this in, at least right now. But he's getting these leaves that are just very difficult. The 5-10 right side setback with a piece of wood. Again, in front of the 5, that'll be a redirector right there, and he sails in between the 5 and the 10. Funny enough, I think every time Chris goes to throw a spare ball, there's a pin setter on lane 9 that seems to be screwing up and makes a weird noise when it drops. And I think both times, I don't know if it messed him up or what, but I know it caused me to turn my head. But anyways, that's 8 after 3 for Chris. 36 after 3. 2 admittedly difficult spare bids that he was beset with. But hey, that's kind of what happens in Candlepin bowling. Chris Curley doesn't connect with the head pin, but pins are still falling at this point. So 36 after 3 for Chris Curley. That's a 7 drop. 4 horsemen right side minus the 6 pin. The 1, the 3, and the 10 stand. The 1-3 pocket will take this out. Chris is on a... Oh, wow. Thought that was going to go. He had a good ball, but it was a little bit too full on the head pin. This is going to be a 9 or a 10 box for Chris Curley in the 4th. Fires off target. 10 pin stands. That's a 9 box for Chris. 45 after 4 for Mr. Curley. 5 ahead of Ed Sargent's half, and he still has 1 box to go. Curley fires on lane 3. Ball, he held onto it a little bit too long. I saw it in the air for just maybe a quarter of a second too long. I don't think it was a lob, but it definitely affected where the ball went. It was still an 8 drop regardless, the 1 and the 3, and hey, there goes that pin setter again. Chris Curley, he gets it though. The pin setter doesn't affect him. That's a spare for Chris, bookending his half with a 55 plus a ball. Chris Curley, once again, coming alive in this half here in the 3rd game, halfway through. We are officially at halftime here. And now Ed Sargent will be returning to the approach, but while he takes his practice slide, let's also take a look at a couple things in terms of the wild card. Like I said, Chris is at the bottom of the wild card bracket. He's in, but he needs to keep maintaining that position. Ed Sargent, I don't mean to sound negative, but I think he might be, at this point, not in contention for the wild card. But again, we're talking about superlatives and improvement and positivity here with Ed Sargent on lane 4. He has been steadily improving throughout the season, especially in average, so let's celebrate that. So Ed Sargent 1, 2, 3, 5, and 9 pins for a 10 box right now he's shooting at. Ed Sargent, play action on lane 4. Takes a few more out for the road. That's a 7 box for Mr. Ed Sargent. 47 after 6. He's going to have to probably get a couple of marks here at this point to outpace Chris Curley, who's at 55 plus a ball in the 5th. That's Ed Sargent on lane 4. Drops 5. 1, 3, 6, 9, and 7. And he connects with the 1-3 pocket. Will the 7-pin fall? It falls late. There we go. That's a mark for Ed Sargent. And that's the kind of action that I've noticed is kind of, if Boutwells has sort of signature pin action, that's the kind of pin action that we've been seeing. And where a piece of wood might very lightly roll to a standing pin, and it will go. When in other houses it might not. And oh boy, I think Ed Sargent got a little bit too excited with that. He has a 1 fill on the spare for 58 and 7. Takes out only the 7-pin. Sargent on the remedial ball. He's on the pocket. Well, I thought it had a chance to take everything out, but the 5, the 8, and the 10 pins are what's left for a 10 box for Ed Sargent. And that's going to be a 7 box for Ed. 65 and 8. Again, while we have a moment, let's take a look at the wildcard standings again. We have Ed Sargent ahead of Todd Holbrook and Veronica McAllister. Chris Curley is behind Ray McAllister, Bill Olson, and Sarah Wright in the wildcard bracket. Those are the folks to keep an eye on in terms of who is who in terms of the wildcard bracket. But meanwhile, Ed Sargent just had a strike. Slow-moving strike, but it went regardless. That puts him at 75 and 9 plus 2 balls for the fill. That might have been the break Ed Sargent needed. He gets 2 balls for the fill, so definitely will be helpful when he can get a good fill on this. Sargent fires. It's on the head pin. That was a good ball. Wasn't misdirected that time. 3, 6, 10, 7. 6 so far. And counting for Ed Sargent. Let's see if Ed Sargent can pull it out here right in the end. Ed Sargent drops the ball a little bit awkwardly at the release. So that's going to be a 7 fill on his strike. He's at 82 in the 9th. And it looks like it will be a 9 box for 91. On par for his average for the most part. His average is 92.1. Okay, so just a little bit under average, but still not too bad. 91 will be Ed Sargent's concluding third game. That's the benchmark for Chris Curley to reach. Chris Curley is currently at 55 plus a ball after 5. With 5 boxes to go here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. 1 strike for both of our bowlers today. 2 spares for Ed Sargent, and 3 spares for Chris Curley. I'm Steve Kelly. This is Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. Pleasure as always to have you along in this Class D North match between Ed Sargent and Chris Curley. While we're waiting here, just taking a breather. Here's the standings. So Chris Curley, in terms of averages, he's 17th in D. Ed Sargent down ahead of Todd Holbrook at 29th. And then in terms of superlatives, Chris Curley has the 6th highest single in D class. That's tied with Win Trafton's 143. And we will now say hello to Chris Curley once again. He's filling a spare, might I remind you, after that spare in the 5th for 55 plus a ball. Chris Curley's spare fill. It's going to be, ouch, a quarter Worcester. So 1 fill on the spare. Takes out the 3-pin and the 3-pin only. I swear that shot is more difficult to get than a strike some days. Still frustrating nonetheless. He sails the ball through the same location that took out the 3, taking out the 9-pin this time for a half Worcester. Oh boy, Chris Curley for a salvage mission here for a 10 box, and he'll complete the trip to Worcester. That is a full Worcester as he half Worcesters the opposite side. That's a 4 box for Chris Curley. Oof. 60 and 6 for Chris Curley. Compare that to 47 and 6 for Ed Sargent. Chris Curley is going to need to make sure he can maintain these next 4 boxes just enough to eke out the W for the 2 additional points. Chris Curley really badly could use these extra points, again, for wild card and playoff contention. Chris Curley dropping 5, and then he spares up that smattering of pins. Said spare, not strike. Spares up that smattering pins. It was a 3, 5, 6, 7, 10 with no wood, and he got it. Excellent shot by Chris Curley. He's now filling a spare, his 3rd mark of the game, 70 after 7. Chris Curley releases on the 1-3 pocket. 7 fill, looks like. 1 pin really desperately wants to fall, but he's left with a 2, 4, 5. That's a 7 fill. 77 after 7 for Chris Curley. Chris Curley on the spare bid, and Unfortunately, the ball sails a little bit too much to the left of the 2-4 pocket, taking out only the 2, leaving the 2 and the 5. Take out the 4 pin, I'm sorry. 10 box for Chris Curley. He cleans it up. 87 in 8. Seems to be figuring things out just a little bit more now. 87 and 8 for Chris Curley. Compare that to Ed Sargent's 65 and 8, but Ed Sargent got a strike and a 7 fill in the following box. So Chris was off target to the left, but had a bit of a generous pinfall afterwards. The 1, the 2, the 3, the 5, and the 10 pins on the deck with a center diamond. Center diamond plus the 10 pin. There's a piece of wood behind the 2 and the 3 pins. I think it's in between the 2, the 3, and the 5. Hitting the 1 or 2 pocket or the 2 or the 1 or the 2 pocket or the 1 and the 3 pocket should create enough pin action to cause a pretty spare here. Chris Curley a little bit too much to the right of that pocket. He's left with the 1 and the 10 pins on the deck. That's an 8, 9, or 10 box possibility for Chris Curley now. On lane 4 at Boutwells in Concord, New Hampshire, Chris Curley for the 10 box, and he's going to get halfway there. 9 box, 96 and 9 for Chris Curley now. Compare that to Ed Sargent's 82 after 9. Chris Curley will take the 3rd game officially, as he has already passed 91, and he still has 1 box to go. Curley fires. He understands the assignment. He knows he needs to maintain points for this wild card bracket positioning to become a reality for Chris Curley. He's had a good season, but he just has to keep it up. 6 drop, 4 horsemen right side, 1, 3, 6, 10. Takes out only the 6. No spare for Chris Curley. It's going to be a 10 box opportunity now. 1, 3, 10 pins are on the deck. And play action on the 1, 2, and 10, and he gets it. He will clean up once again for a 10 box for 106 in the 3rd game here. 3 game total of 284 for Chris Curley and a 3 game total of 268 for Ed Sargent. Chris Curley has swayed things back in his favor up to this point. He's got 4 points to his name so far. Sargent with 2. Chris Curley up in the total by 16. Won the 3rd game by 15. We haven't factored in the total points until the very end, but if we ended the game right now, Chris Curley would be at 4 points and Ed Sargent would be at 2. So that's where we stand. We're going to move on here to the 4th game here in just a moment now. 4th game start. Ed Sargent, our away bowler. That's Ed Sargent down there in the black shirt on lane 3 at Boutwells Bowling Center. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Great to have you along, broadcasting both on Candlepin Bowling Network and on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Facebook page. We'll later upload this to YouTube, of course, as well. Needless to say, Ed Sargent for a spare bid, and he's left with the 5 and the 9 pins on the deck. Oops. There we go. 5 and 9, and he's looking to just get a 10 box, and it's going to be an 8 box for Ed Sargent. You know, throughout this match, I've had it in the back of my head. I can't say Chris Sargent, but in my head, I keep saying Chris Curley and then Ed Sargent, and in my head, occasionally I crisscross Chris and Sargent. I can't help but think of Chris Sargent, one of the holders of the all-time high single in Candlepin bowling history. I believe it is 245 off the top of my head. And I believe him and Ralph Sem both bowled it in the 90s/2000s/early 2010s, I believe. Feel free to correct me on that in the comments. I don't have Wikipedia or anything open. That's just from memory. Ed Sargent with a 5 drop and still a 5 drop after 2. 3, 6, 10, 4, 7. Some wood across the 4, 7. Takes out 1 more to complete the banana split. That's a 6 box for Ed Sargent. I'm not certain, but he hasn't had a lot of low boxes like that today. Ed Sargent's been doing very well staying up in the 8, 9, or 10 range. The 6 box has been kind of oddly low for him today. 14 after 2 for Ed Sargent. Ed Sargent with a record of 58 and 152. When he's away, he's 32 and 66. When he's home, he's 26 and 86. He's bowled 15 matches this season. Dropping 6, the 1, the 3, the 7, and the 8 pins are on the deck for Ed Sargent. Sargent for a spare bid. Was on the object pin, but hits it oddly not too full, but not too spread either, if that made any sense. 3, 7, 8 for a 10 box for Ed Sargent. And doesn't collide with any standing pins. Hits a piece of deadwood that doesn't collide with anything else. That's a 7 box for Ed. That's 21 after 3 for Sargent. 21 after 3. Sargent on lane 3. And he washes out the right side. 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10. And he takes out a few more pins. And by a few more, I mean everything but the head pin. It's a 9 or 10 box for Ed Sargent on lane 3. Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire on lane 3, and he will take out that head pin for 10, clean up. 31 after 4. With 1 to go before Ed Sargent sits. Ed Sargent winds up on lane 3. He pitches, play action, ball traveling on the 1-2 pocket. A little bit full, but drops 6 regardless. 3, 6, 10, 7. Piece of wood behind the 3, 6, 10, and 1 diagonal to the 7, half in the channel, half out. Ed Sargent on the 3, 6, 10, and he almost converts the spare. Sends a pin over to the 7. Taps the piece of wood in front of it, but doesn't take it out. He's going for a 10 box. He will get that 10 box. That's a 10 box for Ed Sargent to sit on a 41 half. Here in the 4th game of 5. Here on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour in round 18, this Class D North match between Ed Sargent and Chris Curley. Hey folks, if you like Candlepin content and this is somewhat new to you, I want to just kind of direct you to 2 YouTube channels where you can find some other fun Candlepin bowling content. First of all, there's Candlepin Bowling Network on YouTube, posting the Friday Night Pro League as well as the Pro Series and other Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour matches, some Hall of Fame inductions and all of that. There's also Candlepin Corner, which hosts the Skin Show, in which roll-offs and tapings are still actively going on. So check that out if you feel so inclined. We're going to say hello to Chris Curley on lane 3 at Boutwells for the first time this 4th game. Chris Curley fires off to the right of the head pin. 1, 2, 7, 8, 10. 1-2 pocket with some wood behind it will take this out. But Chris doesn't connect with the 1-2 pocket. Instead sails through the hole where the 4th, or pin number 4 was. Chris for the 10 box on the 1-2 pocket, but pins don't spread enough. He's left with an 8 box. Should be an 8 box. Might need to correct that on the scoreboard as Ed scored it as 7. So we will come back to that 8 box. I will mark that as something to check later. Chris with a 1 drop on lane 3. And the second ball, he drops a few more. 7, 8, 6 pins on the deck. Pieces of wood in front of the 6. 3 pieces of wood in front of the 6. And that'll be a 10 box for Chris Curley. Should be 18 after 2. The one that Ed is keeping track of down there currently says 17 after 2, but I am fairly confident in my assessment that the first box should have been an 8, not a 7. So we'll talk to them about that later, either online or offline. Don't know. Anyways, that's a 5 drop for Chris Curley. 1, 5, 3, 6, 10. For a spare on the 1-3 pocket, and he takes out the 4 horsemen, running them down, but leaves the 5 pin, that sleeper pin. Stands tall, resilient for a 10 box. Chris Curley shooting down the center and sails off to the left for a 9 box. That appears to be 27 after 3 for Chris Curley. And again, the compy score, this is where we diverge a little bit, and I'm going to kind of maintain my position where I believe his first ball was an 8. So Chris fires off the left for half Worcester, but with a couple extra friends taken out. The 1, 3, 6, 9, 4, and 7 pins are on the deck. Curley fires on the head pin and spares it up. hits the invisible 1-2 pocket, but takes everything else out. That's 37 plus a ball for Chris Curley after 4. Chris Curley fires, releases on the 1-3 pocket, filling a spare with 7. Ball was on target for that one. 44 after 4 for Chris. Pin rolling out of play. So anyways, while we wait for that to be cleared, so yes, check out Candlepin Corner and Candlepin Bowling Network, particularly the Friday Night Pro League and the Pro Series, which just finished up very recently with Aaron St. Cyr being the champion of that whole rigmarole with the Sweet 16, Elite 8, semifinal, and final rounds. And again, so if you like Candlepin Bowling, check out candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center. If you're in New England, which is Candlepin Bowling Land, there is bowling everywhere to be had. Check out places like Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, that's where we are today. And plenty of other places that may be even closer to you. Chris Curley for an 8, 9, or 10 box. He will settle for an 8 in the 5th, sitting on what should be a 52.5. I will comment that currently they have the first box as a 7 for Chris when I think it should be an 8. There we go. Just wanted to confirm with them and just let them know that happened. So we are now back in sync. Chris Curley is indeed at a 52 after 5. Maintaining score integrity is an ever work in progress. Always tough to do, especially in the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour where, so get this, we have a copy. Actually, here, I'll kind of hide a couple things so you can even see that for a couple seconds. You'll see up there, that's the copy score scoreboard. You'll see on the TVs up there. But we also have a paper copy, which is the official copy submitted for the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. And then we also have the stream copy, which is just for the stream. But in some cases like this, it is helpful where someone might miss something and it just helps to have some verification or have a second set of eyes on things. That's always helpful. I know when I was rewatching Wynn Trafton versus Sarah Wright yesterday, there were a couple of scoring confusion in terms of scoring a couple of boxes here and there. It didn't end up mattering in terms of the grand total or the pin or the point distribution, but it was an occasional 1 or 2 pins here and there that were actually missed. And that may have had to do with maybe the automatic score system or maybe someone just missed a fill or something. But it does happen. So it's one of those things where this is just kind of an ever incomplete work in progress. That was a 9 box for Ed Sargent, by the way, leaving the 10 pin. That's 50 after 6 for Ed Sargent. On Candlepin Bowling Network on YouTube in particular, I just re-uploaded the Wynn Trafton and Sarah Wright match. And in that match, I added a couple of notes on the scoreboard in the editing room just saying, yes, there might have been a couple of just scoring confusion or scoring inconsistencies, and I just made some notes just on the stream just to clear that up. Anyways, Ed Sargent for the 4 horsemen left side, the 1, 2, 4, 7, shooting for a 10 box here. And he's going to take a 9 box home. Another 9 box. Ed Sargent really in the market for 9 boxes today. 59 in 7 for Ed Sargent. In case you missed it at the half, Ed Sargent was at 41 after 5, and Chris Curley is at 52 after 5. And Ed Sargent washes out the right side. The 1, the 2, the 5, the 4, the 7, and the 8 pins are on the deck. Ed Sargent will take just a few more out for the road. The 1, the 2, the 5, and the 8 pins for a 10 box. 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. He'll take one more out. That's a 7 box for Ed Sargent. That's 66 and 8. Appreciate you watching this Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match, this regular season match between Ed Sargent and Chris Curley. That's Ed Sargent in the black shirt on lane 4 at Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. That's a left side washout in the first ball for Ed Sargent in the 9th frame. And second ball sails into the void where the washout occurred. 1, 5, 3, 6, 9, 10, 7. It's a 3-box or better. It's going to be a 4-box for Ed Sargent. Ouch. That's going to be... Might be his lowest box of the day so far. He's at 70-9. 70-9 for Ed Sargent with 1 to go. Ed Sargent dropping 7 with a wiggly 3-pin. 7, 9, 10. With wood all around the 7-pin in particular. And Ed tries to go for it, but can't quite convert the 7, 9, 10. Ed for the 10 box. He will clean up for a 10 box. That will be an 80 in the 4th for Ed Sargent. 80 in the 4th game for a 4-game total of 348 for Ed Sargent with an 89, an 88, a 91, and an 80 for the day. Chris Curley, meanwhile, at 52 after 5. He used to reclaim 28 points in this game to tie, or 29 to take points. And in terms of match, Sargent is up by 12 that Chris Curley needs to regain. So Chris Curley in somewhat comfortable positioning at this point. We'll see if he can continue that pace. Chris Curley dropping 8. The 7 and the 9 are on the deck. Curley for a spare. I was going to say it would be pretty if it went, but the 7 and the 9, only the 9 goes. Ball bounces around, doesn't take out the 7. For a 10 box, Chris Curley will take a 9 box. 61 after 6 for Curley. Take a look at Chris Curley's stats, because I don't think I had a chance to show them earlier. He's 125, 113, 8th place, 97.7 average for the season, 98.6 average at home, 96.9 average when away. 2nd place in D North Division 2. Currently in the wild card. He's at the bottom of the bracket, so he has a lot to maintain in terms of points and making sure things go the right way. It's like in the NFL when a team has a possibility to be in the playoffs, but all these conditions have to happen. That's sort of where Chris Curley is right now. Chris Curley doesn't get the spare here. He's left with a 9-pin, shooting for a 10 box. 9 or 10 for Chris Curley, and he will get that for a 10. 71 in 7 for Mr. Curley. With 3 to go here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. I'm Steve Kelly. That's Chris Curley down there on lane 4 at Boutwells. This sunny Sunday afternoon, April 21st. Chris Curley dropping 8, a fast 8. 3 and 10 left on the deck. Piece of wood across the 3 and the 10. It's slightly off the 3 to the right. That can be deceiving, but we'll see if... Nope, that ball went into the channel. That's a -1 foul for Chris Curley. Because the ball went into the gutter, came out, and took a pin out, so that should be a 9 box, I believe, for Chris. It's marked as a 10, though. It's 9. Yep. Just making sure that was corrected, because it was put in as a 10 on CompuScore, but both me and Chris caught that, so... Here we go. So Chris, oh boy, washes the right side back corner out. 3 pins taken out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. Will be a pretty spare if it goes for Chris on the 1, 3. And he's left with the 2, 4, 8. For a 10 box. 7, 8, 9 or 10 box for Chris Curley. That's a 10 box in the 9th. That's 90 and 9 for Chris Curley. So he has taken the 4th game. He was tied as of the 8th frame, but he now has it in the 9th with 90. With 1 to go in the 10th frame, Chris Curley's first ball of the 10th frame, and he's on the head pin a little bit too full. Drops 6. 2, 4, 7, 10. Plenty of wood to play with. 2-4 pocket is the best bet for this. Curley, but doesn't collide with any of the pins, just hits a piece of auxiliary deadwood. Same pins remain on the deck, 2, 4, 7, 10. Piece of wood behind the 2 and the 4 pins. Same object pocket is the target. This time he hits that, but a little bit too full on the 2-4. That's a 9 box for Chris. That's going to be 99 after 10 in the 4th game. He takes the 4th, 99 to 80 over Ed Sargent. 4-game total of 383 for Chris Curley versus a 4-game total of 348 for Ed Sargent. Curley up in the match by 35 and takes the game by 19. Chris Curley currently with 6 points. Ed Sargent with 2 points, not factoring in the grand total. If we did factor in the grand total right now, Chris Curley would have 10 points. But we'll intentionally leave that out until the 5th game because we want to say it's possible until the very last moment. So we're going to move on to the 5th game and say hello to Ed Sargent one last time for one last first half of the match today here at Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. Ed Sargent off to the right of the head pin, takes out the 6-10 and takes out a couple more on the left side as well. 6 up, 4 down for Ed Sargent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9 on the deck. Sargent for a 10 box, full on the head pin, leaving the 4 pin on the deck. That's a 9 box for Ed Sargent. 9 after 1. Show you the standings one more time in case we missed it earlier. Chris Curley, not a division leader, but his record is good enough to be in the wild card. And with today's performance, I think he's still relatively in it, but it's also going to depend on the performance of others as well. I know Bill Olson has a match coming up. Brian Hebert has a match coming up. Wynn Trafton and Sarah Wright did very well yesterday, but Wynn Trafton just eked out the win over Sarah Wright. Wynn Trafton already division leader, Sarah Wright at the top of the wild card in D North. That is a 9 box for Ed Sargent. 18 after 2 for Ed. And let's talk about the ACST. So the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, or ACST, is a season of candlepin bowling among bowlers sorted into classes and divisions calculated based on total bowlers as well as averages of the bowlers. Each matchup against 2 bowlers is a scratch match, which means there are no handicaps or other assistive point value modifiers other than what we see in the live matches. There's a maximum of 14 available points per match. 2 points awarded to the winner of each game. The bowler whose cumulative total is the highest. The bowler whose cumulative total is the highest will result in an additional 4 points awarded. That's a 9 box for Ed Sargent, his 3rd 9th of the game for 27 after 3. A tie and a string will award each bowler 1 point. A tie and the grand total will award each bowler 2 points. The D class of the ACST is a north and a south half with 4 divisions between the 2 of them. Each class presently has roughly 32 bowlers, 60 in north and 60 in south. We have a new E class of the ACST that will be starting up this fall when the ACST season returns this fall. Plenty of new bowlers interested in signing up, so we had to create a new entire class. And it's simply just because the quantity of bowlers has increased. We have classes A to E next season. That's an 8 box for Ed Sargent. 35 after 4, with 1 to go before he sits. I'd highly recommend Candlepin Bowling for those who enjoy predictable, repetitive, routine-oriented actions and tasks, as it has a somewhat regimented and structural framework to it. I know I enjoy the dopamine effect it grants when I bowl, with particular attention to the potential of throwing a blockbuster and record-breaking game in Candlepin Bowling, as it has never been done before. No one's ever thrown a 300. Along with the thrill of mentally calculating how many marks I can throw and how much of a score I can efficiently compact into a small array of frames. Candlepin Bowling is really fun like that. Candlepin Bowling is also a great sport to play for folks of nearly any age. Flexibility of the sport's physical requirements allow for a wide variety of accessibility. And That's a 9 box for Ed Sargent that he's going to sit on almost a perfect half of 9s for 44 after 5. Oh yeah, there's far less back pain in Candlepin than 10-pin bowling. There's room for breaks and rest in between turns. Also camaraderie among friendly competition. That's something one does not often see in other sports, quite like Candlepin bowling. Chris Curley now. This will be his final first half of the match today, his final time on lane 3. Final time for any bowler to be bowling on lane 3 in this match today. Chris Curley now. So far doing quite well in terms of points. He's got 6 so far, potentially 10 if he can hold the match. We know he needs this today. Chris Curley was talking to me about this yesterday at the All-Star Review at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. He was all hyped up for this match, telling me he really had to just kind of focus his energies today and make sure he stayed in the wildcard bracket. He drops 5 in the first, and going for the spare bid, he doesn't take out the 10-pin, but he gets everything else. It was the right kind of hit, and I wouldn't have done it any differently. Chris Curley for the 10 box, and it's going to be a 9 box for Curley. Make a slight adjustment to the pin cam here because we've had a slight drift in its positioning. That's a bowling alley for you. Sometimes the little earthquakes and things cause cameras to slightly move very, very slightly over time. I know it's Central Park lanes. It's very difficult to position cameras, and the cameras shake and the floor shakes and the tables shake and it's loud, and it's an old building at Central Park lanes. Chris Curley dropping 5, 4 horseman right side plus the 9-pin. He takes out only the 2-pin. Get a closer look at that once again. Sorry to miss the zooming action here. The 1, the 4, the 7, and the 9 pins for Chris Curley are what he has to shoot at for a 10 box. Play action on the pocket on the correct object pin. That's a 10 box for Chris Curley for 19 after 2. Did you know that Candlepin bowling was first played in 1880 in Worcester, Massachusetts? It's thought to have been developed by a Justin Pop White, owner of a billiards and bowling hall. And some trivia provided by Microsoft Copilot. The International Candlepin Bowling Association, or ICBA, was founded on January 9th, 1986. The formation of the ICBA was prompted by a desire to unify the sport. And one moment, I'll pause to celebrate Chris Curley's spare there. It was the 4 horseman right side plus a sleeper. Takes it out handily, runs him down. 29 after 3 plus a ball. Anyways, the ICBA was prompted by a desire to unify the sport so that bowlers would be playing under the same conditions and rules no matter where they bowl. Chris Curley punching out 5. Well, not punching out 5, washing out 5, leaving the left side hay bale. That's 5 on the fill for 34 after 3. The ICBA is an umbrella organization that consists of delegates from each state and provincial association for both the United States as well as Canada. Chris Curley punches out a few more for the road for a 7, 8, 9, or 10 box. Again, no one has ever recorded a perfect game in Candlepin bowling. The highest score is 245 out of 300 possible points. And neither of those games has ever been caught on tape, although enough people were able to confirm it, and it is in the record books officially. Candlepin bowling uses 10 pins that are thinner, taller, and don't have a bottom weight. The pins are cylindrical and taper slightly at each end, making them more likely to bounce around when hit. The balls in Candlepin bowling are smaller, lighter, and they're holeless. They fit in the palm of your hand. Fun facts for Candlepin bowling. Be sure to like and subscribe for more useless fun facts. But they're fun facts. Curley shooting at a 7, 8, 9, or 10. No wood to help him. The 2, 4, and 6, I believe. Takes out the 6, leaving, the 3, 4, 6. That's an 8 box for Chris Curley when all is said and done. And that's the end of the first half, the final first half. Chris Curley at 51, Ed Sargent at 44. We are now in the end game, the home stretch for both bowlers. The final 5 boxes for both bowlers coming right up on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. That's Ed Sargent down there. I'm Steve Kelly up here. It's been a pleasure casting this match for you today. I hope this was a pleasant experience for you. A couple of special thanks before we go. Just trying to squeeze this in before the very end. Special thanks to our ACST League Commissioner Danny Finn, Our stats and numbers are crunched by Micah Imperado. Thank you for that, for sharing the OneDrive link with me every single day and week so I can pull these stats and appear that I'm sounding smart about numbers. Brian Hebert for statistical graphics used in this broadcast. Of course, the staff at Boutwells Bowling Center, always super friendly here. I recommend they seem to know me by name now, so they always say hi to me in particular. And you, if you're watching, I don't care where you're watching, I don't care how you're watching, as long as you're watching, I just appreciate you watching, because certainly wouldn't do this if you weren't watching. So, hope you guys have enjoyed this match and thought it was good. And Ed Sargent dropping 6. The 2, the 4, the 6, and the 10 pins are on the deck. He's shooting for a spare, and he sails off to the left. So it's going to be a 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box for Ed Sargent. He's at 51 after 6. And he will take 2 more for the road for 8. That will put him at 59 after 7 for Ed Sargent. If you're new to the world of Candlepin bowling content, thank you for watching. I hope this was a pleasant viewing experience for you, as I mentioned before. And if you want to see more, check out the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Store page on Facebook, as well as Candlepin Bowling Network, Candlepin Corner, Alley Chat, and the Candlepin Bowling Channel, where all kinds of other videos, streams, and productions are regularly posted in addition to results and statistics. There's also the Candlepin Chat page on Facebook, where there's just a lot of general discussion about Candlepin bowling. Fun facts, fun videos, goings-ons, and all other kinds of fun content for you. And Sargent, pin's still falling, and he's left with a 5 pin on the deck. A generous 9 box, so it was a good out for Sargent. That's 68 in 8 for Ed. Again, very consistent with Ed. Name of the game for him today, if I could pick out anything that sticks out in my memory, he's been very good with the 8s and 9s today. And there is something to be said about being consistent. Sorry, I forgot to flip the scoreboard on the main view here. 68 in 8 for Ed Sargent. And Ed, first ball, a little bit disastrous. Second ball, on the pocket, taking out a few more for a 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 box. 2, 7, 6, 10. Ed Sargent fires. Misses. It's going to be a 6 box. He's at 74 after 9 for Mr. Ed Sargent. With 1 to go. And then that will be it. He's currently at 422 for the series total, plus whatever this next ball is, or next box is, that is. On the 1-2 pocket, a little bit too full, but leaves the right side check mark. The 3, 5, 6, and 10 pins for Ed Sargent. And misses that check mark off to the left. The Verizon check mark wins again. 74-9 with a potential for 84 for Ed Sargent if he can take this check mark out. Takes 1 more out for the road. That's a 7 box for Ed. He will conclude with an 81 for the 5th game. For a 5-game total of 429 for Ed Sargent. That's up in the game by 30. Well, he has 30 pins up by the second half. That's how much Chris Curley needs to regain to tie. 31 to take the 5th game. And it's only 5 for Curley to regain for... No, I'm sorry. Chris Curley is already up in the match by 5, so that's it. Chris Curley has already taken the 4 for the match. My mistake. Sorry, I apparently can't read my own score sheet. Chris Curley has Worcester'd out the right side, the 3 and the 9, and takes out a few more. The 1, the 2, the 5, the 8, the 6, and the 10 pins are on the deck for Chris Curley. Curley fires on a wow, he hits the head pin and takes a few more out. That's a 6 box for Chris. I said that's a 6 box. There we go. 57 and 6 for Chris Curley. And at this point, it's just gravy at this point. It's just bonus for Chris Curley. He has taken the match, needless to say, and he's just working on getting to 81 or better here in the 5th game. I played the All-Star review at Leda Lanes yesterday, so my brain is in 3 games mode as opposed to 5. Chris Curley dropping 6, taking one more out. That's 7, 8, 9, or 10. In the 7th for Chris. And it's going to be a 7 box. 64 in 7 for Chris Curley now. Has to get to 81. At least 2 10s will get him there. But we'll see how Chris Curley gets there. He fires, play action on lane 4. That's a 9 drop. It could be a 10 drop. How's that 5-pin doing? It's on life support down there. It's wiggling. That piece of wood gave it a nice tap, but looks like it's not going to go. Single pin spare for Chris Curley against that 5-pin, and he gets it. That's a single pin 5-pin spare for Chris Curley on the kingpin. 74 plus a ball in the 8th. And he just has to get to 81 to tie 82 to take the 5th game and more or less lock it up. Chris Curley, a bit of a nervous release on the ball there. Looks like a 3-fill. Off the right side, taking out the back right triangle. He's at 77 after 8. He releases, takes out a few more for the road, and by a few more, I mean everything but the 4-pin by the looks of it. I think that's a 4-pin. But he leaves the 4-pin. That's a 9 box for Chris. That will be the 5th game for Chris with that 86 and 9 officially. And he's up in the game and up in the match. And counting with 1 box to go. On the head pin, he releases the 4, the 5, the 7, and the 10. Difficult spare leave. Piece of wood isn't going to do much for him, but I would play it. I would still play it. What do you got to lose? Chris Curley fires, takes 2 out, takes half the pins out, 5 and 10 on the deck. No wood to help him now. The right side setback, 5-10 for a potential 96 finisher for Chris Curley. Instead, it's going to be a 94 with that 8. And that's going to be it. That's the end of the 5th game here. 94 to 81, Chris Curley over Ed Sargent in the 5th. 5-game total of 477 for Chris Curley. Victorious in the total over Ed Sargent's 5-game total of 429. And that should just be about it. Here's the final stats and how everything appears to have shaken out. Chris Curley will take 12 points today, going from 125 and 113 to 137 and 115. Ed Sargent, all the while, taking 2 points, will go from 58 and 152 to 60 and 164. Overall, it's been mostly the Chris Curley show today, with Ed Sargent taking the 2nd game, but Chris Curley maintaining control for the rest of the game. In terms of marks, both bowlers tied with 1 strike apiece. Sargent with 2 spares for the day and 8 10s. Chris Curley with 7 spares and 7 10s. Perfect box percentage is 22 for Chris Sargent and 30% for Chris Curley. Anyways, that should just about do it for us today at Boutwells Bowling Center in Concord, New Hampshire. I hope you guys enjoyed this stream on this Sunday afternoon. Again, if you want to see more and can't get enough of Candlepin Bowling, check out Candlepin Corner and Candlepin Bowling Network on YouTube for tons of other Candlepin Bowling videos. And also, if you want to just get out there and go bowling, go to candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center. I've been Steve Kelly, and for Ed Sargent and Chris Curley, I hope you guys have an excellent weekend, excellent rest of your day or night or whenever time it is. Have a great one, everybody.